On today's show, we'll talk about what needs to happen for Cavs forward Evan Mobley to win Defensive Player of the Year for the first time in his career. Plus, we'll take a look at the trends for the Cavs and dive into who they might see in the postseason. We'll do all that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like 92.3 The Fan, my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. A proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you are also subscribed to Locked On Cavs daily newsletter, your one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That is lockedondaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Cavs daily newsletter. Evan Mobley, of course, we haven't spent a ton of time talking about this because things have been so busy over the last week or so, but with the news of Victor Wembanyama being out for the year because of a blood clot in his shoulder, Evan Mobley now has a much more significant chance to win Defensive Player of the Year than he did at this time last week. So before the news of Wembanyama's injury, Victor was the very heavy favorite. Like if you looked at FanDuel or any of the other sports books, Vic was his odds were like minus 2,400 to win the award. You did not want to. There was no value in betting Evan Mobley. Like the only way for Evan to find his way into legitimate contention to win this award, and I think he would have been a finalist either way, but was Victor Wembanyama not reaching the 65-game limit. Well, that has been assured now because he won't play that many games. And now Evan Mobley is the co-favorite to win the award. After Sunday night's win over Memphis, the odds on FanDuel have been adjusted. So before the game on Sunday, Evan Mobley was plus 130 to win Defensive Player of the Year. Jaren Jackson Jr. was plus 125. So there was a very, very slight edge for Triple J. And then after the game on Sunday, when I woke up Monday morning, or really, I guess Monday afternoon, it was very late, not Sunday. And the odds were one of the first things I checked. And I noticed that instead of Mobley being just very slightly behind Jackson, the two were tied, both at plus 125. So they are now co-favorites. And I think that this is going to be Evan Mobley's award to go out and win. I think that what he's done this year, he's been a fantastic defender. And I think that the one thing we need to see from him, from the Cavs, and I say from the Cavs there purposefully, because I do think that while Evan Mobley it's not a team award, right? Like this is not Defensive Team of the Year, it's Defensive Player of the Year. But I do think that there needs to be team defensive success. I don't think that Evan can win this award if the Cavs finish 10th in defense in the NBA. I think they probably need to finish about where they're at right now. I actually kind of think that whichever team between the Cavs or Memphis finishes higher in defensive rating, like finishes closer to the top of the league in defensive rating, that could be ultimately the thing that decides this award. Not saying I agree with that because I think Evan Mobley is a better defender. I think he's a more versatile defender. I think he's a better rebounder. I think just overall he's a better player than Jaren Jackson Jr. And if you watch the game on Sunday, like I thought Evan thoroughly outplayed Jackson. I really did. I thought that he had a much better game on both ends of the floor. Not to say that, and this isn't to say that Jaren Jackson Jr. is not good because he's a really good player. I think a lot of teams would be really happy to have him. I just think every team would probably pick Evan Mobley instead of him. Like teams would rather have Evan Mobley on both ends of the floor than Jaren Jackson Jr. But one of the things that game did was it pushed the Cavs ahead of Memphis in defensive rating. It pushed them from 8th to 7th, which, of course, not that big of a jump. Their defensive rating actually, I think, got a little bit worse. But obviously, Memphis's got much worse because the Cavs scored more points. The Cavs had a better offensive night in a game they won against Memphis. And I think that's part of the reason why these odds shifted. But I do think that for Evan Mobley to win this award, the Cavs defense needs to keep climbing. And I'll dive into this when I talk about the trends coming up in segment number 2 that I'm going to dive into. But how the Cavs finish out the year. Are they going to finish with a top 5 defense? I don't know. Like for the full season, I think that might be a little bit of a stretch just because they've had some really rough patches. Like the month of November was really bad. The month of January was really bad. They've had some really, really strong peaks because December they were third. I think they've been pretty good in February so far. But what we're going to see is they're going to be, and Evan Mobley specifically will be awarded if the team can continue to rise up that leaderboard. Maybe if they can get to 6, I think 5th might be a little bit tough for them to get to with just 25 games left remaining in the season. But I think if Evan Mobley continues to be the best defensive player on this team, which there's no doubt that he's going to be that because he is one of, if not the best defensive player in the league. But I think that this is an award where the Cavs need to help him reach this award. And of course, this is not the first time that Evan has been in contention. You think back to 2 years ago, finished third in the voting. That was the year Jaren Jackson Jr. won the award. Brook Lopez in Milwaukee finished second. Now, what was it about Mobley's game? Like, is Evan Mobley a worse defender than he was back then? No, of course not. But part of the reason why Evan Mobley got so much love and finished in the top 3 was because if you go back and look at that, where the Cavs ranked defensively that year, they had the number 1 defense in all of basketball. And if you look at, right now, the number 1 defense is Oklahoma City. They don't necessarily have and this is an award that of course goes to bigs far more frequently than it goes to guards. Like this is just, it's a big man award for the most part. Not to say guards can't win. Guards have obviously won, but it's a rarity to see that happen. And who is OKC's best defender? It's a wing. It's Lou Dort. And they've got a lot of really good defenders, but I just don't see a path for anyone on that team, despite the fact they're first, to win this award. I do think that the third place finisher will probably be Lou Dort if he reaches the game's requirement, which I haven't looked at how many games he's going to play or on pace to play, but I don't think that's in jeopardy for him. So I think that this award is Evan Mobley's, not to lose, but it's his to go out and win. And I think that he has the leg up. I'm a little surprised that he and Jaren Jackson Jr. are tied. And I will say, I was a little surprised that when Wemby was ruled out for the year and all of the odds got readjusted, I was a little surprised that Mobley wasn't immediately the favorite. I was a little bit surprised that Jaren Jackson Jr. was ahead of him. I thought that Mobley would have been up there, and partially because of the team's success for the Cavs. And don't get me wrong, Memphis is a really good team. We just saw that Memphis team play the Cavs, and I thought they played relatively well, and the Cavs didn't play their best game and still found a way to win on Sunday night. But I thought that the team's success overall, the fact that the Cavs are, at that point, they were 44-10. Now they're 47-10 as I record this on Monday night. But I was a little surprised because Evan has been such a good player on both ends of the floor. And any of the defensive problems that the Cavs have had this year, I don't look at those as things that have been Evan Mobley's fault. Could he rack up more steals and blocks? Sure. But I do think, the other thing that you look at, and this was really prevalent in Sunday night's game where Evan Mobley had 13 rebounds and Jaren Jackson Jr. I think had three or four. Like he's not a great rebounder of the basketball. And that's something to consider here when you think about this, because you don't necessarily think about rebounds as a defensive stat, right? Like that is not necessarily what pops into your mind, but it is. That's how you finish possessions off. And is Evan Mobley the best rebounder in the league? No, of course not. He's 18th in the NBA in rebounds per game. He's not even the best rebounder on his team because Jarrett Allen leads the Cavs in rebounds per game. He's 11th in the NBA. But you have to scroll quite a ways down to find Jaren Jackson Jr. amongst the NBA leaders for rebounds. That matters, I think. Like he's not in the top 50 for rebounds per game in the NBA. And I think when there are so many things that are close, because he's a great defender, he's very switchable, he blocks a lot of shots, he does a lot of things really well. But when things are as close as they could be in this race, I ultimately think it's going to be team success. So the Cavs finishing the year with a better defense than Memphis will matter, and rebounding. I think those are two areas where Evan can have a distinct advantage. And if he does that, I don't see how he doesn't win his first Defensive Player of the Year award. I think he's deserving of it. If Jaren Jackson Jr. wins, would that be the biggest upset? No, he's a really good defender too, does a lot of things really, really well. And he also doesn't have the same defensive structure that the Cavs have, because who would you rather have defensively, Zach Edey or Jarrett Allen? The answer, I think, is pretty clearly Jarrett Allen. So he doesn't play alongside the same personnel like Evan, probably has a little bit of a leg up in terms of his supporting cast, which is why, of course, the Cavs are a much better team than the Memphis Grizzlies this point in the season. But I do think that there's a good chance that a few months from now, we're talking about Evan Mobley as having won his first Defensive Player of the Year award. All right, let's dive into trends. I've talked a little bit about the Cavs defensive rating, but things are continuing to move in the right direction. We're going to do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass. Every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the very next day. So it's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 2024-2025 NBA regular season, that's this regular season going on right now, Dash Pass members get 50% off in order, up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. So maybe you stayed up late because you just could not miss that game on the West Coast. Maybe it was LeBron. Maybe you wanted to watch the Lakers. LeBron went for 50 or Luka went for 50. I don't know. But maybe you wanted to stay up late so you could watch that and not have to miss a second in the action. That means, oh man, I overslept. I don't have lunch prepared at work the next day. Well, here's what you're going to do. You're going to fire up DoorDash. You're going to sign up for the Dash Pass, and then you're going to get 50% off in order, up to $10 off between noon and midnight for lunch. That's what you're going to do. So, like I said, sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off in order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50, that is NBA50, from noon to midnight the day after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Time for our Tuesday trends. Like I always like to do this early in the week. So if you're new to the show, this is something that once the season gets going, this might not necessarily be as worth doing early on in the season. But as we get deep into the season, I think it's interesting to see how the Cavs stack up against the rest of the league, how the Cavs stack up against the rest of the league, their last 15 games this month, stuff like that. So for the season, the Cleveland Cavaliers still have the best offense in the NBA. Their offensive rating is 122. That means they're scoring 122 points per 100 possessions. That is absolutely absurd. They are just 0.2 points per 100 possession, 0.2 of a point per 100 possessions behind what last year's Boston Celtics team was. Why do I bring that up? Because the Celtics last year had the greatest offensive rating for any team in NBA history. Now, this is a number that we've seen this record set, a handful of times. Like there have been several best offenses ever over the last decade because there's been an explosion of talent on that end of the floor. There has been a revolution. I think offensively teams are more efficient. Teams are scoring at a higher rate. They have figured out defenses. And I just think that the skill level in this league is higher than it's ever been before. And I think that offensive rating is a direct reflection of that. So the Cavs have, as of right now, the second best offense of all time. That's how good they are. They have the second best offense in NBA history if this were to be their final number for a full season. Of course, they still have 25 games left to play. Maybe they do surpass Boston. Maybe they finish with an offensive rating better than that 122.2 that the Celtics had last year. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But that'll be a fun thing to monitor the rest of the year. Just how high can they keep that offensive rating? Because this is an offensive juggernaut. I think they got better with the addition of DeAndre Hunter. I think that is something that has helped them. And I just think that they are so difficult to stop. On the defensive end of the floor, for the season, as I mentioned, the Cavs are in 7th. This is moving. They have moved up. They got as low as 12th a few weeks ago. Near the end of January, they were around 12th in the NBA in defensive rating. So they have steadily been climbing up and up and up, and they've been better defensively. Their defensive rating for the season is 111.2, which is not awesome. It's not bad though either. I think they are in a pretty good spot defensively. That's something to be happy about. So if you look at the defensive rating leaderboards, it's very bunched up between 12th and where they're at in 7th. So the Detroit Pistons, and this is being recorded before the end of the Pistons game on Monday night against the Clippers. It looks like they're going to win that game, but like their advanced numbers are not calculated into this. So maybe they move up. I don't know. But they are in 12th with the defensive rating of 112.7. The Cavs are in 7th with the defensive rating of 111.2. So it's just 1.5 points per 100 possession between those two teams. It's a very tight margin. Basically, it's the same margin between 7 and 12, and the Cavs getting up to 5 where Boston is. I do think it's possible that the Cavs get up to 6. I think 5 might be a little bit of a tall task just because that gap is fairly significant with only 25 games left. And I just think that the Boston Celtics are really going to lock in. So, of course, net rating, your offensive rating minus your defensive rating. Cavs net rating is plus 10.8. They're outscoring opponents by 10.8 points per 100 possessions this season. That is absolutely absurd. That is one of the best numbers in NBA history. This is a team that is not just great, and we need to see what they do in the postseason. And I understand that everything that we talk about with this team, really from now until the end of the year, is going to have that caveat. It's always going to be, how does this translate to the playoffs? How does this translate to them facing off against Boston? How does this translate maybe against Milwaukee or against Indiana or Detroit? We'll talk about those teams coming up in just a second. But how does that translate? Like, that is something that is going to be at the top of everybody's mind. And what I can say about this is teams that are as good as this Cavs team is, historically, that translates to the postseason. The Cavs are one of the 10 best regular season teams of all time by net rating. They are one of the most dominant teams that the NBA has ever seen. It's crazy because they're not even the most dominant team in the NBA this year. That's OKC. The Thunder, as of right now, have the second best net rating ever for an NBA team. And yes, there are games yet left to play, but these two teams are both on track to being two of the top 10 regular season teams in the entire history of the NBA, which is an absurd thing to say, but it's true. Right now, the Cavs have the 8th best net rating in NBA history. Like, that is, it's just hearing that out loud. It's like, I don't know that we necessarily have appreciated just how good this team is. And if you look at the top 10, teams that finish in the top 10 of net rating for a season, like historically, top 10 of all time, those teams very rarely don't win the title. I think there are 2 instances for teams that are currently full season top 10. So take OKC out, take the Cavs out. The only 2 teams that didn't win a title the year they finished in the top 10 of net rating, the 2015, and it's funny because it's a similar situation to this year. The 2015-16 Spurs, which everybody forgets about, but that team won 67 games. They were great. They actually had a better net rating than the 73-9 Warriors, who also finished in the top 10. Of course, as we know, that season ended with neither of those teams winning the title because the Cleveland Cavaliers won the title that year. So for the most recent 15 games for the Cavs, this is more than a month. It's about a month and a half worth of games when you factor in, the All-Star break. The Cavs have an offensive rating, and this is just ridiculous. They have an offensive rating of 124.7. They're scoring 124.7 points per 100 possessions. That is, of course, the best mark in the NBA during that stretch. The Denver Nuggets are pretty close to them, though. Denver's offense has been great. I don't think either team has played that brutal of a schedule here. But this also does factor in, too. The Cavs are 11-4 in that stretch. So it factors in those losses to Houston, The loss to Philly, and I don't remember the other game that they lost. Maybe Boston. Yeah, the loss to Boston. All those are factored in, and they're still, and even in the one loss to Houston, they only scored 108 points. Like, they are absolutely just an offensive steamroller. Defensively, 111.9, so higher than what it is for the season. That's 10th in that stretch. But as I mentioned, some of those losses that are in there, like they gave up a ton of points in the one loss to Houston, the loss to Philly. Those games are still counting. So when those ultimately are removed from this, that I think that'll take a huge jump. They have in this stretch, as you would imagine, the second best net rating in basketball, plus 12.9, behind only OKC, who's been not as good as the Cavs offensively, but they've been significantly better on the defensive end of the floor. Now, the number that it's a very small sample size, but this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm interested in. And it's how are the Cavs trending from the time they acquired DeAndre Hunter through the end of the season? What do they look like offensively? What do they look like defensively? We're going to talk about that. Plus, take a quick preview at who the Cavs could be playing in the postseason next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. If you're watching the show on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. The Cavs, since acquiring DeAndre Hunter, have obviously been really good. They've not lost a game that he's played in. They haven't lost a game even going back to, prior to the trade deadline, as they've won 7 straight games. But in the 5 games now that they've played with DeAndre Hunter, so this is dating back to the February 10th game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Cavs are tied for second in the NBA in offense with an offensive rating of 125.5. So their offense has gotten better than it has been. And of course, these numbers are all very small sample size. So it's not something as if this should be the fact that they're in second shouldn't matter. It's the fact that they've been so good offensively with him should matter. Defensively, and this is what I'm watching because I just don't think that there's anything that could really make this Cavs offense worse with the personnel they have, unless they just stop making shots, as they didn't against Memphis. And even then, they still almost scored 130 points in that game. But the defensive rating, the Cavs have a defensive rating of 106.3 in the 5 games that DeAndre Hunter has played in. Obviously, this is not all directly tied to DeAndre Hunter. Dean Wade has been healthy. Isaac Okoro has come back in that stretch. Like there are a lot of factors, but I look at that February 10th date as, not to say the Cavs haven't been trying hard all year, because you don't win 47 of your first 57 games without doing that. But I look at that December 10th date as, okay, this is when they really push the pedal down. This is when they really start to lock in. They really start to focus as to, okay, it's time to get ready for the postseason. So that's why I'm going back, not necessarily just because of DeAndre Hunter, but because 1, that's when it starts to be go time. And 2, that's when the team changed. Like fundamentally, there are differences about this team now than in December. And I think that those numbers in December, while they matter and they were awesome defensively during that stretch, I think that what we see from this February 10th date until the end of the season is going to carry more weight for me. So their defensive rating in that time is 106.3. That's 5th in the NBA. Net rating of plus 19.2, which is the best mark in the NBA, as you might imagine. So who might the Cavs play in the postseason? And as of right now, there are a couple of games that have been completed since I started recording this. So I do have updated standings here. But the first round, like I don't see, and maybe I'll talk about this maybe on Thursday's show before the game against Boston, or maybe Friday's show. I don't know, depending on what happens tonight against Orlando. But I don't see a world really where the Cavs don't finish with the top overall seed. Like, I think that has been, I know it has not been clinched. I know they haven't even clinched a spot in the top 6, but a 6-game lead with 25 games left, when the Cavs have only lost 10 games all year, I'm not sure they're going to lose 6 more games this season. So I just look at that as, okay, it's really difficult for me to envision them not finishing with the number 1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference. Maybe they'll have the number 1 seed in the NBA. I don't know. But they are going to play one of Orlando, Atlanta, Miami, Chicago, or Brooklyn in the first round. Brooklyn is currently a game and a half behind Chicago for 10th. It's basically somebody has to be 10th. And if you listen to this podcast all the way back in October, September, when, projecting what the standings were going to look like, of course, I did not have the Cavs first. I think I had the Cavs third in the Eastern Conference, but it was always going to be somebody's got to finish 10th, right? And maybe I didn't project Detroit to be as good as they are, but I certainly didn't project Philadelphia to be a team that I didn't even mention as a potential opponent for the Cavs, because there's just no way they're going to get the 8 seed. Like, I don't see them finishing in the top 10. If they do finish in the top 10, I don't see them winning 2 play-in games and getting to face the Cavs. So the Cavs will be facing the winner of the second play-in game. That's what their first round opponent will be. So the first play-in game, as things stand right now, would be Orlando versus Atlanta. The winner of that game would get the 7 seed and face Boston. And then the winner of the 9-10 game, which right now is Miami and Chicago, they would face the loser of the 7-8 game. If you are a Cavs fan dating back a few years, you remember the Cavs went through this when they lost 2 play-in games, both to Brooklyn and then to Atlanta, and missed the playoffs the year before Donovan Mitchell arrived. So that is one thing to keep in mind here. There's not a team in this conversation that should scare the Cavs. None of these series should be long series. I look at all of these as sweeping a team is tough, but I don't think any series in the first round for the Cavs, considering who they're going against, like all of these teams are below 500 teams. I don't think any of these should be looked at as, yeah, I could see how that gets to 6 or 7. Like, this should be a 5-game series. If the Cavs handle their business and if they're healthy, all of these opponents should be able to be dismissed in 5 games. So then we move on to who could they see in the second round. And right now, they're going to, I would be stunned if the Cavs don't face a Central Division opponent in the second round of the playoffs. So Milwaukee is 4th right now. They're tied for 4th with Indiana. Both teams are 32-24 on the season. And then Detroit is 6th at 32-26. Milwaukee has a really difficult month of March. That is one of the key things for me to watch. Like, I would not be surprised, and I'm not betting this, I'm not banking on this. I would not be surprised if the 4-5 matchup in Detroit's red hot, they beat the Clippers tonight. They've won 7 straight as well. But I would not be surprised. I actually don't think they've lost since Darius Garland's buzzer beater against them. I would not be surprised if the 4-5 matchup is Indy versus Detroit. That would not shock me. I would probably pick Indy there, but JB Bickerstaff has done a great job with this Pistons team. Cade Cunningham has been terrific. But again, not saying that should only be a 5-game series if the Cavs play one of those 2 teams. But what I'm getting at here is there is not a team in the Eastern Conference other than the Boston Celtics, who the Cavs would be underdogs against. But outside of Boston, there's not a team that I look at in the East that the Cavs shouldn't be heavy favorites against. Like, they should be favored to win every series by a significant margin, except against Boston in the Eastern Conference. So I just went through essentially teams 4 through 10 as teams that the Cavs, 4 through 11 right now in the East, as teams who the Cavs could face in the playoffs. And I don't think any of them should be scary in the slightest bit. Cavs are back in action tonight, taking on the Orlando Magic. We'll see what happens in that game. Darius Garland listed as questionable with that hip contusion. We'll see if he plays. Don't know. I wouldn't expect it to be a long absence if he doesn't play tonight. I would expect him to be back on Friday when the Cavs are in Boston. But I will be back, of course, tomorrow talking about the Cavs taking on the Orlando Magic. So make sure you are subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. Again, I'll be back tomorrow talking about the Cavs taking on the Orlando Magic.